on this contest that please. So good evening all. So on this lecture, please follow the last lecture that is there in my YouTube channel. I have already shared this link in the All India Research Scholar group. And today I will try my best looking at the last lecture. So basically, I will try that what is the structure of this research paper. Particularly, we all researchers, so our aim is to write a research paper. So I will try on this idea, taking this idea, so how to write a research paper. So broadly, so please, my request to all of you, please go through this lecture and also another lecture by Professor Sadiq. So all this use of AI in writing research paper in this last taken by Professor Sadiq, and this is available in this my YouTube channel. So looking at this, if you go for particularly most of the journal, so that we are writing the paper, the structure of this of paper, most of the journal is you just look at the structure. I hope the slide is visible. So like the title, abstract, keyword, introductions, literature review, methodology, result findings, discussions, conclusions, and reference. So I will try to give you an idea one by one. So most of these papers that we are writing for publications for any journals, so you will find this most of the journal, the structure is like this. Okay, so I hope you all know it. So, but I will try to give you a overall idea. So you just look at it. So if you go for particularly on the contest that we are talking about, so you just, the first is the title. You just please, you read this title, what is written there. But I will try my best to give you my own understanding and what a researcher should know, that most of the students, that whenever we are writing a journal or manuscript for publications, so the title is very, very important. Okay, so that means most of the cases you just look at it. So a title should be very good title. So what do you mean by good title? So good title is defined as the fewest possible words that adequately describes the content of the paper. Okay, so you know, if you go for most of the cases, you as a researcher, so please, so I will share, I have many times I have shared this PPT also, and also I will revise this the structure, this the paper last time that I have shared. So I will also share this PPT, so don't worry for that. Also, if you go for particularly on the contest that we are talking about, this the title, so title is very, very essential and important. So that point you need to keep in mind, because this is the point, this is the starting point. So if you go for, you as a researcher, so most of the cases, because if you go for why the title is important, because most of the editor, most of the reviewers, and most of the readers, so generally, so they immediately look at their, when you submit a manuscript, so they if you go for, they first immediately look at the title. Okay, so in that, if you go for all the points that I have written, you just read this, the title that we are talking about, because it will create a first impressions of your research work. Okay, so all the point that you talk about, your manuscript visibility, your readership, your citations, and also particularly for the database, like you talk about the Google search engine or any platform that you are searching. Okay, so most of the cases, so you as a researcher, so you needs to keep this point that you will give a title in a such a manner that grabs the attention and accurately describes the content of your manuscript and makes people want to read further. Because you know that always when we as a researcher, so we as a audience, so we as a most of the researcher when we are doing, so what we did, we read the title and we read the abstract. Then we decided whether we will read the whole article or we decided whether we will purchase the article or not. So on this content, you as a researcher, you needs to keep in mind that so title is very, very important. So you needs to keep in mind most of the cases. So Abhinav, you are not admitting students. Many people are waiting. Okay, no problem. So if you go for, so in this sense that a good title is clear, specific, keyword rich, and accurately communicate the essence of your research work. That you as a researcher, you needs to keep in mind. Okay, so you just so read this slide. So on this, why the title is important. So in the context, the slide is changing. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Please,
Yes, sir.
I'm not
Changing.
able to see anyone. Please, you just let me whether the slide is changing or not. Okay, so you as a, if the first, so particularly on the contest, whenever, so you as a researcher, you needs to keep in mind that the title should be clear, should be specific, title should be concise, title should be informative, and also you need to remember one important point that the title itself should focus on this, particularly reflect of the what is the this the study is about. Okay, so all the point that I have written, so you needs to keep in mind whenever you are giving this contest that of writing paper. So remember one thing you needs to keep in mind. I always suggest that please, so you try to write the paper and then you try to write the title of the paper. That point you needs to keep in mind. Always it is suggested that at least whenever you want to write a paper, you start with a tentative title. Maybe you write 4, 5 title. When you finish your writing the paper, so you needs to keep that think and revise the title of the paper. Okay, so you all the point, you just look at it. So whenever you are writing a paper, so all the point that is written there, you need to think on it. And what is the important point you need to avoid? Most of the cases that you just the title, most of the cases you as a researcher, whenever you are writing a research paper, so always you need to keep in mind that the title should not be too long or too short. That important point you need to keep in mind whenever you are writing this, the title that you are talking about. And the second point, you just look at it that always, most of the cases, you try to avoid most of the formula, most of the short form, most of the abbreviations. So all the point that I have written, so you need to avoid whenever you are writing the title. And I always say, you as a researcher, most of the cases, so try to avoid like some words that is written in the research article, like a study of, an investigation of, or observations of, or research on, like this type of word. I try to avoid these words in your title itself. Okay, so am I clear on this point or any clarification so far? Am I clear?
Very clear, Prof.
Yes,
Very
sir.
clear.
Yeah. Okay, so this is something about your first, the preliminary that we talk about, this the title. Then this is very, very essential that please read quickly on this that we called as a abstract. Okay, so if you go for particularly on this abstract, so you need to keep in mind. So this is very, very essential that most of the readers or most of the editor or most of the reviewer, okay, so if you go for this play a significant role. So because it will determine, okay, whether the editor will accept your paper or not. Okay, so or a researcher or a reader will read your paper or not. Okay, so that is the point you as a researcher, you needs to keep on this point. So if you go for, so you needs to keep in mind most of the journals, if you go for general guidelines, so the abstract, most of the journals, so you will find starting from 150 to 300 words. Okay, so you just from journal to journal, it varies. Okay, please read this whatever written in this slide quickly. So I will try. So that means whenever you are writing your abstract, so in 250 words that you need to write, so you need to write the point that particularly that we called as a your background of the study, your objective of your study, your methodology of your study, your findings of your study, your implication and conclusion of your study. Okay, so that means in this 200 or 250 words, as per the journal guideline, you need to write a abstract of 250 words or 200 words, taking all the point. You just look at it, because most of the cases, So if you go for the slide that I have written, so that means you needs to write the background in 1-2 line, the objective in 1-2 line, the methodology in 1-2 line, the major findings in 1-2 line, and also these conclusions or suggestions in 1-2 lines. That if you go for, so whenever you are writing, so you needs to keep this point. Okay. So if you have any questions, please, you will stop me and you will ask me. I will try my best to answer each questions. So that means this is very, very essential, because so if you go for most of the cases, so as a reader, as a researcher, suppose you as a researcher, you want to read a article. So before you read a whole article, you first read this abstract. So in this sense, whenever you are writing a manuscript for a journal, so it is very, very essential that all the point that is there, you needs to be very clear. Okay, so now if you go for most important point, so always if you go for the 3 P's, the purpose, the procedure, and the principal findings, and all the point that I have already explained. So you as a researcher, you needs to keep in mind, so always, whenever taking all the point, like most of the cases, if you are also writing your seminar abstract or conference abstract, okay, so you needs to follow the same pattern, that always you as a researcher, to if you go for, so you needs to keep this point. And if you go for, so all this, because if you are writing the abstract, okay, so on this principle, which covers your background of the study, your objective research questions, hypothesis of your study, your material method used in the study, and your broad findings of your study, and the specific conclusion or suggestions you want to, only want to line. And one point that you need to keep in mind, always I say that you as a researcher, whenever you are writing a abstract, you just look at it. Yeah? So all this point, the slide is changing or not?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Yes.
Okay, good. So you as a researcher, so you understand that within this word limit, so always you need to keep in mind whether you are, basically you just imagine, I am just giving one example. Suppose I am working on tribal issue in Odisha. So particularly on livelihood issue. So I want to write a abstract on that. Okay, so I need to write the background. Background means why this, particularly in this 1-2 line. So the tribal are more vulnerable tribe groups in this society. And since independence, the government has, both the state government and central government has spent huge amount of money for their development. Yet their development, if you compare with other general populations, is missing or is lacking with respect to all socioeconomic indicator. So the objective of this paper is to find out what are the obstacles or what are the factors that are responsible all these poor socioeconomic conditions. And the paper is based on both primary and secondary data. The primary data is collected from 300 household, tribal household. And besides, also it use secondary data, which includes different articles, journals, report, and like, okay. And the paper reveals and the paper concludes like all the point that you as a researcher, whenever you are writing the abstract. And the important point you need to keep in mind, always you as a researcher, please, so you need to stick to, if you are, whenever I will explain later, so if the word limit is 250, so you need to write 250 words. Okay, so taking all the point that I'm talking about. And important point in the abstract, most of these cases, so write in first is, if you go for, always it is written in the past tense. Always remember one thing, please don't write, okay, don't cite any reference in the abstract. That you, most of the cases, and this is most of the journals, if you go for, the point is that you no need to write or cite any reference in the abstract. If one thing, if you are writing extended abstract, in that case, so there is a possibility that you can also include the reference or cite reference inside your extended abstract. But in the main, if you are writing abstract, please don't write, or sorry, don't cite any reference in this abstract. That is the important point you need to keep in mind. Don't give any figure, don't give any tables or nothing whenever you are writing this abstract, that you have to keep in mind. Okay, now, so this is something, so you understand that we are talking about this abstract. Okay, so you read this line by line, what is written there. Okay, so you as a researcher, whenever you are doing on this contest. Okay, so the first part is, if you go for, so that we are talking about on this aspect. And this one is very, very essential, that we called as a keywords. Okay, so you need to keep on this point that most of the journals, so if you go for, you need to write 5 or 6 keywords. So you need to write most of the journals. So if you go for, so generally we follow 4 or 5 or 6 keywords. Generally 5 and 6 can most of the journals. So you, because you as a researcher, you need to keep on this point that whenever you are writing, so the keywords is very, very essential for your paper. One point you as a researcher, you need to keep in mind whenever you are selecting the keyword for your research paper. So you need to keep in mind always this, all the point. Please read the PPT, what is there. So always remember one thing. So you try to give the keywords in a such a manner. Okay, so important term or important keywords that you are going to discuss, or you have discussed in the content of your manuscript. Okay, so that you have to always keep in mind whenever you are writing or selecting keywords. So the keywords should be very relevant to your research paper. And most of the, if you go for, suppose I am working on tribal, so suppose tribal livelihood. So I one keyword is livelihood, one keyword is education, one keyword is health, one keyword is displacement, one keyword is indigenous knowledge, one key, many, all, that means you need to select a keyword that you as a researcher, you have discussed these keywords in your paper. That you have to keep in mind. Whatever keyword that you are writing, 5 or 6 keywords, always you need to keep in mind that this is the first important point. You just read all the point that is written. And the important point that you as a researcher, you need to keep in mind whenever you are writing this, particularly the keywords. When I was, if you go for most of the cases, so on this aspect, that when I am writing a keywords, you as a researcher, you need to keep in mind that always you select on this aspect that we are talking about, that always remember one thing. This is very important point. Whenever you are giving a keyword, so you need to keep in mind that the keyword, whenever you are, this keyword should not be in your title. Many times, if you go for always, you as a researcher, I also did the same thing. So when your title, this word is there, suppose livelihood, that tribal livelihood, okay, or caste discriminations. So your keywords should not be discriminations. Keywords should not be livelihood. That means whatever the words that is there in the title, that should not repeat in the keyword. That is the point you need to keep in mind. Most of the cases that we as a researcher, this is the very important point. Okay, so always we need to keep in this point that whatever word in the title, that should not be a keyword. Okay, so that this is the point that you need to keep in mind. So you understand, whenever you are writing a research paper, your title, your abstract, your keywords, these things you need to be written in a proper manner, okay, proper order, and with justifications. Okay, all the point that I have explained, you as a researcher, you need to keep in mind on this aspect. Any questions so far? Any questions? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Really, sir?
Yes, sir, very well.
Yes, Prof. You are very audible.
Okay.
Very good
So you,
explanation.
yes. So now, so you understand on this point that your title, your abstract, and your keywords. Okay. So now we will proceed for our, so your preliminary part is over, and then your main body of your, that is the, you know, that is your introductions. Okay. So you just please read, you just read these introductions quickly. Everyone should read quickly on this aspect, that if you go for, so whenever you are writing introductions, so you need to follow the 3 dimension, that if you go for, so 3 order, beginning, middle, and end. You just imagine, you, because I hope you all know nothing new that I am telling in front of you. So whenever you are writing these introductions, okay, So all the point is written there. You try to read it, yeah, quickly. Then I will try to discuss and you will ask me questions. I will try my best to answer that questions. So whenever you will go for, so that means in these 3 stages or 3 points that you as a researcher, whenever you are writing, you need to write on this point. Okay, so in this first, whenever you are writing, maybe 1 pages or 2 pages, you are writing your introductions. So 1 or 2 pages. So within this 1 and 2 pages, so what you have to do, that there is the principle that you have to follow. In the past, in the beginning, what you have to, generally, you need to provide the background of the study. Okay, so if you go for the first maybe 1 paragraph, I have just written you just on this. In the first paragraph of your introduction, you as a researcher, you need to provide background informations of your study. Suppose I am working on tribal, I am working on gig economy, I am working on gender issues or anything. So you as a researcher, so the first paragraph, so you try to provide this background of the study. Suppose I am working on tribal. So you need to, on this background, so you need to follow this principle of general to specific. Suppose I am working on tribes, so I provide general the concept of the tribal development. Then I come to the livelihood. Then I come to this education. Then I come to this this particularly on the health, or I come to specific. Always, and remember one thing, always in this, whenever you are writing introductions, so you as a researcher, you need to keep in mind, you are always writing most of the cases, particularly on the context that you are talking about. So 1 paragraph, this background informations of your study that you are providing, so you need to provide citations. And remember one thing, these citations that you are providing, that should be from those who are expert in that area. Those, suppose I am working on tribal issue or caste issue, like those who are established figure on this area, those who are on that area. So you need to at least include that citations in this particularly the context that you are talking about. Okay, and remember one thing, well, this is not a most of the introductions, if that is not the comprehensive review that you are making. You need to provide with citations, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 citations, the conceptual background of your research work. Then, so this main body, the middle part, you need to write on this aspect, that what is the importance of your study, why the study is necessary, what is new in your study. Because most of the editor, most of the reviewer, so always ask these questions, what is new in your research study? Okay, so that is the very, very important. So you as on this middle part, so with citations, basically most of the term that we are talking about, that we called as a research gap. What is the gap on the topic that you are working, and you try to, what is the gap, what is the importance of the gap, and that is possible through your review of literature. So that point, maybe 2 paragraphs or 1 paragraph with proper citations. You need to write the middle part of your that contest of your research paper that you need to write, because this is, remember one thing, this is very essential for you. So that means the rationale, the importance, the necessary, or the new on your research work. So okay, so that particularly you as a researcher, how you when you identify this research gap, so how you are going to address that research gap in your research study. Okay, please, you need to keep in mind, please don't write any result in your introduction part. Please, so you have to keep in mind, please don't write, this is the point, important point. Most of the cases, you no need to write this particularly the contest of your, that we call as your result. Okay, so that is the important point you need to keep in mind. And this is the, if you go for particularly on the contest that we are talking about, the middle part and the end part in the introductions. So you need to keep in mind that that we called as a, you need to write your research questions, research objective, research hypothesis. Okay, so on this, so taking on this background, so the present study or the present paper, try to find out on this. So that means in this part, so you need to write your hypothesis, your research questions, your objective, and the last part, you need to write the structure of the paper. Okay, so that you have to write, because most of the cases you need to write. So with this background, the structure of the paper is divided into 4 parts. So the first part is on introductions and background, and the second is on this methodology, and the third point is your broad findings, and the last part is based on the road ahead or the policy implications. Okay, so you as a researcher, you need to keep on this point. Okay, so this is maybe 1 pages, 2 pages. You need to write the introductions, and if you go for, remember one thing, so you write these introductions at least 4, 5, 6, 7 these citations related to your research work with established on this area, those who authors, those who are there, and the time period. Maybe try to use maybe contemporary citations. And always you can, because you are writing introductions, when I always encourage you as a researcher, you try to cite some contemporary on this, particularly whenever you are writing these introductions. Okay, am I clear? Any questions so far? If you have any questions, please. So you understand that the preliminary part of the manuscript, then you understand in the preliminary we talk about the title, the abstract, and the keywords, and the main body of your, particularly on this research paper or the manuscript. So the introduction is first. Okay, so the introduction you need to keep in mind that it is 1 pages or 2 pages, taking all the point, the background, the middle, why the study is important on this point. Okay, so you as a researcher, so you need to keep in mind. Okay, now you understand So this introduction part generally. So the main tips that you need to follow, write in 2 pages or 1.5 pages with all the points that I have explained, your background, your rationale, your this relevance, your the problem, your objective, your research questions, and your structure of the paper. And the third point is your citations. And the citations should be contemporary. Okay, try to use the contemporary citations on that. Okay, so then, okay, so when you finish your the introductions, then the second part is a review of literature. Okay, so if you go for, so you just look at this review of literature. Okay, all the point. Again, I no need to explain. You just read quickly. I have already explained the whatever this on this point that you as a write in this contest. So I have written always that maybe 5 to 7 to 800 or 2 pages that you need to write. Okay, all the point that you need to write. I have already the background, the necessary, the new contributions you are making, all on your gap and all the points that I have already explained in this the introduction part that you need to follow. Okay, so when remember one thing, I always request you always write introductions, but not one times. You need to revisit after when you finish your first rough draft of your paper, you again revisit your introduction part. Not also, okay, you need to keep on this point. And the second part of your research work, I hope you all know, nothing new, that we called as a review of literature. Remember one thing, I will share one point. I hope you know this review of literature, that most of the cases, so you need to follow the journal guideline. First, let me explain what do you mean by review of literature. Remember one thing, my request to all researchers, those who are present here, please don't write the abstract or summary of the article is as a review. So you need to understand what do you mean by review. So basically remember one thing, I always say, whenever you are writing review of literature for your PhD thesis or a research paper, it is not abstract. Many times I say, please, you write down 5 columns. Okay, so in the first columns, you write down the name of the author. In the second column, write down the title of the article. And in the third, you write down the objective of the paper. And in the fourth, you write down the findings and the implications of the paper. And the last, that we call as a missing, or that we call as a comments. So that is very, very essential. What you find that the author has not discussed in this paper. My humble request to all of you, if you are writing as a PhD students, so most of the cases, so if you go for this review of literature, so always, so you need to, most of the cases, you as a researcher, so first do like this. Your intention of doing review of literature, that always you need to identify what is missing in the literature or what is gap in the literature that all the authors, all the literature available on your topic, and you as a researcher, what is you are going to study new on this case. So I generally, so you summarize, then compare, then critically evaluate, then you synthesize, and then you identify the gap. Okay, so always you know what is known, what is unknown, or what is missing, and that missing, out of the missing, that how your study is going to contribute on this missing aspect. You as a researcher, you need to be very, very clear. Okay, so always those who are many times in this public domain, I say that if you are a PhD student, if you are writing PhD thesis, you need to write, suppose, 100 article review that you have done. In the last part of your review of literature chapter, you need to write, having gone through this international, national, regional, on different aspects of my study, the present study is different from the existing study as follows. Okay, so this is something about your review of literature. But if you are writing for the journals, so you need to keep in mind, if the journal format says that you need to write a review of literature as a separate subheading, then you write a separate subheading on a review of literature. If that is not there, in that sense, so you try to write this review of literature on this context that in the introduction chapter itself. Okay, so in this, one thing I will say here, in this review of literature, so your choice, you just look at the structure of the article that you are going to submit on this journal that you are planning to submit. I will explain detail more on this. So you need to be very, very clear on this point that I am talking about. And one point that I always say, that one is called as a conceptual framework, your theoretical framework. You as a researcher, you need to write in this particularly. If any theory, what do you mean by theoretical framework? Theoretical framework means that particularly in the social science literature, that either any theory that you are using that theory in your research work. Okay, so maybe you need to little bit clear on these dimensions whenever you are, most of the cases that we call as a conceptual framework and theoretical framework in the review of literature part. So this is very, very important. Most of the researcher, so far my understanding is that we don't have a clarity on this aspect. So whenever you are writing journals, because there is some, you cannot write like your PhD thesis 20 pages. So you maybe suppose 20 articles you are reviewing on different aspects related to your research work, and that should be contemporary, that should be relevant, that should be related to your research study, and that you need to cite on this your study. So you can look like maybe, so you as a researcher, so if you are writing, you can write in this way that we call as a review of literature whenever write. That always I say, for the journals, you need to write this always that we call as a peer-reviewed journals. Not this, all this, many articles are available without peer review. So always you need to follow. I will explain the details in this methodology, maybe your Scopus, your Web Science, or any that particularly the peer reviewed that journals you need to follow. Okay, this is the second main body part of the manuscript that you are writing. Okay, so far any questions, please? Just let me ask. Any questions, any clarifications?
Sir, how many pages or words we have to write in this section?
If you go for generally, remember one thing, most of the cases, if you are writing a research paper, so maybe if you are giving 10 to 15 reference or citations and review, particularly on the study, I think that is more than sufficient. On different aspect, I say if you are writing maybe 1 pages or 1.5 pages or so 800 words, something like that, if you are particularly on the review of literature aspect, because most of the journals, there is a restriction of the word. Maximum, if you go for journal, most of the journal, you will go for 6,000 to 7,000 word limit. Okay, so most of the cases so far in the contemporary times, so review of literature is combined with your introduction part. Okay, with proper citations. So if you are writing 1 pages, I think that is more than sufficient for but you need to take not 1 pages. You need to cite maximum on different aspect or specific, and this should be contemporary on this. That you have to take into account. Is it clear?
Yes, sir. In many papers, we seen introduction and literature review combined together.
Yes. So because of that, I say most of the journals in the contemporary times, so there is no separate heading for review of literature. If you go through the journal website and guidelines, and you find that you need to write review of literature, so you can write a separate heading. But otherwise, you can combine itself in the introduction part, this review of literature, taking all the points that I have explained. So in that part, you just provide different aspect, different area related to your research paper, so on different component in the introduction part. Am I okay?
Sir, I have a question. Sir,
Yes.
sir, while
Yes,
writing the okay, sir. Sir, regarding the conceptual framework, do we need to mention the conceptual framework as a heading after introduction, or just we have to mention it?
No, if you are writing a research paper, so in that context, so if you go for, it is not essential that you need to write the conceptual or theoretical framework as a heading in this paper. Because most of the journal also then require the conceptual and theoretical framework as a subheading. But I always prefer that if you are writing, but PhD thesis you need to write. But research article, if the journal is giving the instruction to write the conceptual framework or theoretical framework as subheading, you can write. Otherwise, you merge in the introduction part and the review part on this conceptual and theoretical framework. No need to write subheading, because if you write the subheading, so it will be, if you go for, you imagine the 600 words, 6,000 words, so it is very difficult for that. So in that context, but if you are writing PhD thesis, it is must. You need to write subheading a different with itself in this, particularly in your PhD work.
Okay, sir. In case of PhD thesis, so how much long should be that conceptual framework?
That you can do if you go for, like, the conceptual framework is So basically the concept that you are using. But in case of your theoretical framework, suppose if you are writing 2, 3, 4 theory related to your research work, you can write, suppose your PhD thesis, 4, 5 pages combined together. That is more than sufficient for your theoretical and conceptual framework in the review of literature part.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Can I proceed?
Yes.
Okay. So you will ask me, huh? So I will try to question. So you understand, so the introduction, you understand the review of literature. Okay, please, my so this part is very, very essential. Like most of, if you go for this, the article that is rejected, I will come to later on this point. So if you go for the methodology of your research paper, so always you need to be very clear that what is the in the methodology that you are writing 1 paragraph, 2 paragraph, 3 paragraph for the article, for the manuscript that you are writing. So you need to all the point that I have taken into account, all the point. That the slide is visible or not?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay, good. So you just look at it. If you go for particularly on the context that we are talking about, so all the point that is written there, most of the you as a researcher, I am sharing my own experience. So you needs to be very clear on the point that we are talking about. What is this particularly? You basically, so how did you carry out your work, or basically how you conducted the study? So this is the central on this methodology part. So we call as a methodology, we call as a methods, we call as a data sources. Okay, all the points that is there. So in this paragraph, maybe 2 paragraph, most of the cases. So if you are writing 500 words on this methodology part for these journal articles, so you need to be very clear all the point, the research design, the study area, the data sources, the sampling method, the data collection method, the data analysis method, the ethical considerations, all the point you need to taken into account. I have already, maybe I have already explained, but I will tell here, if you are writing in 500 or 600 words, the methodology, you need to all this, because always you need to write the methodology in the past tense. Always remember one thing, you need to mention when you have collected the data collection period. So you have collected the data collection from July to September, August 2025. So always you need to mention, this is the important point. Most of the researcher, if you are doing a primary survey, you need to mention this point. Okay, now let me explain this point one by one. So you need to explain that if you go for the first component, what is the nature of the research design? Whether the study is qualitative, whether it is quantitative, whether it is both qualitative and qualitative, that we call as a mixed method. So you on the first line, the study was based on mixed method approach. Okay, so that you need to write in the first line. The second line, the study area. The study area was selected Kandhamal district of Odisha. So you need to write why the study area selected. Okay, so all this, particularly why the study area selected, who is your target population, who is your respondent, who will provide the information for your study, why, how, why you have selected the Kandha tribe, and how you have selected the Kandha tribes or the tribals or the target populations. You needs to be very clear, and the explanation, if you have, so you needs to provide the logic of that you have to clearly mention in this methodology. And the third part is that we called as a, if you go for the data sources. This is very, very essential. Mostly that we called as a, the data sources, or that we called as a, if you go for that we called as the tools that we have used in your study. So if you go for, so this paper is based on or was based on both primary and secondary data. Remember one thing, in the abstract, you write only one line, but here you need to write details about the secondary data. What are the sources of secondary data that you have used in your study? Suppose I am work on the tribal. So the present study, the broad secondary data used in the study was the annual report of Ministry of Tribal Affairs, or the Niti Aayog reports, the Economic Survey of India, the different journals, different reports, whatever secondary literature that you have used, clearly mention on that. Exactly the primary data. The primary data was collected from respondent, 300, 400 or 500 stakeholder or respondent household. So you need to write. So how you collect the data? Particularly, so you have used this survey method, this interview method, you have observation method, you have used focus group discussion method. So all this clarity should be there in case of your methodology. And also the tools that you have used, the village schedule, the stakeholder schedule, the household schedule, the whatever the tools that you have used for this data collection, you need to write. And also you need to write, I have already explained, the time period that you have collected the data for the study, that you need to. And also the data analysis, particularly suppose you how you analyze the data. So suppose you have used multiple reductions. So you need to write the particularly the dependent variable, the independent variable, the particularly the model that you have used, all these points that you have used. And the last and important point you need to keep in mind that we call as a, particularly on the context of the consent. You know, most of the journals, if you are doing a primary survey, there is a need for ethical clearance certificate. You remember one thing, ethical clearance certificate, which is very, very essential for most of the editor. So they now require that if you have done a primary survey, you need to follow. All the point that is there in the methodology, you need to write in the past tense. Am I clear so far? Any questions on methodology?
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Sir, if the article is based
Yes.
solely on secondary data, what components should be described in the methodological section?
Yes, if you are right, it paper is basically on secondary data. So suppose most of the economic students they are doing. So you as a researcher in that context, you need to write. So what are the important source of data that you have used on this study? Suppose you have used periodic labor force survey. You are using National Family Health Survey. Whatever data, broad data set. And also the unit. Suppose if you are using the data of different time periods. Okay, the different rounds of NSSO data. Okay, and different components that you are using into account for that, you need to write. And also the important, whatever statistical model that you have used, why you have used this statistical model. And if you go for you suppose logit model you have used, probit model you have used, or ANOVA you have used, or your factor analysis you have used. All this, the methodology, their data set, the model, their expected signs, all and these equations you needs to write on this part. That is the most of the secondary base that people that we are doing in economics. Generally, we write for that. Am I clear?
Sir, what in case of social science, social studies?
I just
I mean,
want to,
sociological.
I just want to
Yes.
find out
Yes.
this methodology. Do
What?
we need to include the philosophical appealing?
Your voice is not audible. I'm not. You please write in the chat box if possible, please. Huh?
So
Write
what
in
is
the
the
chat
ideal?
box. I will.
So what is the ideal sample size for a primary study?
Manisha, many times I say when I have taken the lecture on this, if you are doing a Cochrane formula or Yamin's formula, so generally there is rules for determining the sample size. So if you are not applying and you are doing a quantitative study, so if your sample size is 400 or above 350 for your PhD work, and you are doing quantitative analysis, that is more than sufficient for most of the PhD work or for a paper. But if you are doing a qualitative study, your sample size should be suppose 120, 150. That depend upon your objective or nature of the study that you are conducting. So most of the cases for quantitative, so because you needs to generalize it, so the sample size needs to be at least 350 to 400 plus. For qualitative study, if you are taking 100 plus, 120, 150, that is more than sufficient for a PhD work. So you needs to be very, very clear on this point that whenever you are writing on this aspect, all the point that I have written. So if you go for on this contest.
Sir,
Re-
I have one question, sir. A thing is that sometimes we require to more sample size. That means sample size should be on the higher side. But if you estimate by Taro-Yamane formula or any other formula, sample size is below 400, 385, 400. It is around 400. But our objective is to increase the sample size. What methodology should be followed?
So in that sense, if you go for, remember most of the ICSR, if you go for funding agency, that they needs 2,000, 3,000, they have determined that your sample size should be on this more than 200 from different states. So on this, on the basis of the funding agency, so you, if you are comfortable, you have fund, so you can do a big sample size. That is not the issue, because if you increase your sample size.
But again, they are asking, what is the methodology they have followed for determining the sample size?
So you just tell in that sense, suppose if you go for your higher study, that particularly on this contest, if you apply the same Yamin's formula or the Cochrane's formula, so you tell them that maybe if you are comparing, so the sample size is very large and also different states. On this basis, we have selected. Otherwise, if that is not there, you tell them that as per your guideline, it says that 10% of the populations will be taken as a sample size. So this sample size is this much, and 10% is beyond that. So we have taken this much. You can do that. That is the one way that you can, because they have given the guideline.
even in the guideline they are mentioning sample size should be estimated at 95% confidence level, and the sample size should be on the higher
Right.
side. That is cause that contradiction coming many a times. Actually, this is the
Yeah, I
problem.
know. I know. I have seen it. I have seen it. I've seen it. Okay.
Uh,
So,
Sir, even
so
I have
is it?
one question.
Pucho.
Sir, talking about the qualitative study, sometimes we get saturation, suppose the number is 75 for the sample size, calculated number, but we get saturation from 34 to 40. So what should we do in such cases?
People are doing, Aditi, if you go for qualitative researcher, people are doing, because qualitative study is extensive study, is of narrative, of the different thematic on this. So in-depth understanding of this. So if you are doing a PhD work and your sample saturation is there on this, you can do that. That is not the problem. The only thing is that if this limitation is that you cannot generalize it. That is the problem. So we need to think on this. Otherwise, there is no limitation. Many studies are there. The qualitative study, which sample is 40, 50, 60. Suppose I have work on transgender. I have work on the sex worker. So on this contest, so it is very difficult to get the sample. On that contest, so the limited sample size is because it is very difficult for that. So you need to justify that why your sample size is so low if any questions is coming. But you can do for
So
qualitative study.
achieving saturation is justifiable, right? It is acceptable?
Yeah, why not? You can write with proper justification on this. You can do that. You can write. If anyone is asking, but the question is not this sample. Question is for the generalizations. Question is that the conclusion that you are drawing of this, how this study is going to implicate in the other parts of the country. That is the contest that most of the cases, but most of the PhD students, if you go for, they are doing it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, so if you go for now, so if you have any questions, please, you will ask me. I will try my best to answer.
Sir,
So
I
you
have
understand?
I have an additional question for which I joined here today. Thing is that as you mentioned, the methodology part should be written in past tense. Is it a rule of thumb, or sometimes it can be present perfect tense, like I have seen we have done, or should it be?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes. Generally, if you go for already in this sense, generally we encourage students to write on this, particularly in the there is yes, it's
No,
not
sir, you are
essential
correct.
because
In any journal, in every journal, we see it in past tense. That is why my doubt arises. Is it a rule of thumb that it should be followed, or
yes, generally, if you go for like most of the cases, if you are writing on this, you are writing. But if you are explaining a table and graph, so in that
okay?
sense, you are not explaining in the past tense. If if
Uh-huh.
you go look at elaborating a table or figure, if you know the result section, I will tell you. But most of the cases, we generally follow on this pattern.
Yeah, sir. Only for this purpose, I have joined this lecture today. How the trade-off
Thank
between
you.
Sir, I have
past
one
tense and
question.
present perfect tense.
Yes.
So, yes. Okay. One of my friend is working on a topic in a PhD that is on one particular pressure group. So there has not been any study on that particular pressure group. So she's doing a research on that, and she's very confused regarding the sample size she needs to take. Since the pressure group has been in existence for over the last 48 years, and there has been 336 executive members. So she want to take the executive members as sample, and one chapter she has on the working of the pressure group and people's perception on that, and the particular tribe to which the pressure group belongs. So she needs two type of sample size. So she is confused on the first one with how many sample size should she take for the out of 336 executive members that the organization has seen over the last 48 years.
So in that case, so if you go
This
for,
chapter is
because
qualitative, sir. The chapter is qualitative. Yes.
qualitative in this sense, if you go for you imagine, particularly on the contest that because they are not the main stakeholder, they only provide particularly supplement to your research objective. So you as
Yes.
a researcher, so you need to be very clear whether you are taking the beneficiary, the tribal group that you are talking about, their proportionate should be higher always, because they will tell their perception. So to supplement that, the executive council that you are talking about, so maybe, so you decide that how many, suppose I do not know whether are you using this interview method or the focus group discussion method.
So interview method is there.
So interview, it is not required if it is a qualitative study. So you decide that the proportionate that the executive council members that you need to study. So I think if they are homogeneous group of this all
Yes,
this
yes, that
executive
is a
council that
homogeneous
you are
group.
talking about, so the sample
Yes.
size should be less for
Okay.
qualitative
Okay.
study, because you are doing in-depth understanding on this contest.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, so now so we'll go for this the point. This is now you understand introduction, review of literature, the methodology, and this is the important that we called as a result. So most of the cases that we talk about.
Sir, please highlight ethical consideration also.
Ethical considerations, if you go for particularly, you just most of the cases in the contemporary times, so most of the journals, if you are doing a primary survey, suppose you are working on transgender, you are working on tribals, you are working on particularly sex worker, or any primary survey, as per the UGC guideline, so every university, there is a committee that we call as a ethical clearance committee. So what is the role of this ethical committee? That suppose I have a PhD student, I have 7, 8 PhD students, so they are working on primary data. So I will send this, the university in JNU. So we have in each year, suppose 3 times the meeting takes place. So all the proposal, those who are doing the primary survey, so the notification will come. All these PhD students send the proposals and their questionnaire, that's what they have developed. And all this, the committee is there. So university level committee, they will go through it, and if they approve, so they will provide a certificate. Or if they need something need to be deleted, some clarification, they will do that. So that certificate, if is very, very essential for the publication in the contemporary times. Most of the topmost journals, so the first is, if you go for one thing, they are now talking about the plagiarism report, this the AI report, and this third component is the ethical clearance certificate. And this ethical clearance certificate is very, very essential for the topmost journals. So that is the criteria most of the university. So in the contemporary times, if you are doing secondary literature, so it is not required. Suppose I am, but the editor will tell you, so you need to write, this is a secondary based data. So there is not required of the ethical clearance certificate.
Sir, but in some colleges, there is no ethical committee. Then how can we proceed? And
so now, because it is mandatory nowadays, you need to talk to your principal. You should constitute a committee, and they should look at all this issue. Otherwise, it is very difficult after some point of time. So every university, every college, they should take into account this point. That I always say everywhere.
Thank you, sir.
So now, so you just imagine, so this is the point that we need to keep in mind. And the next part that we talk about, that we called as this result and findings. Remember one thing, you just look at this slide, what is written there. So my request to all of you, please, so try to write, please, if you go for always, whatever broad findings you find from your data or your survey or your analysis, so you only provide that. Suppose you are working, if you go for look at it, always with different subheading. You are working on health, you are working on education, you are working on this income generative activity, on different subheading. With respective to that subheading, whatever findings you got from the field, you need to write that findings from the data. And that findings should be presented in the form of table, in the form of test, in the form of graph, in the form of figures. That you have to keep in mind. Please read. So we have, I will share the PPT with all of you, and I will share this also, this audio video link in my YouTube channel. Please, you will go through it, because on this aspect, so all the important point you needs to keep in mind, that we call as a broad result or findings. Remember one thing, result, so on all the primary data on different subheading that you find, that you needs to present in the form of table, in the form of figure, in the form of graph. And always you need to keep in mind that you as a researcher, so there is no interpretation, there is no explanations in case of your, when you are presenting your field findings in the result. Okay, so this is the important point, the difference between result and discussion. Most of all the explanations, all the interpretations is taking place in case of your discussion section. So in the result, so you need to keep in mind, please read quickly all this. You need to highlight the broad findings from your data and the on different subheading, and broad main findings, unexpected findings, all the statistical analysis that you have made, maybe your descriptive statistics, maybe your correlation, your regression, your logic, your ANOVA, and all the statistical analysis, and the result is only presented in the form of test, table, figures, graph, and all the analysis without any interpretations and explanations. Okay, so that you have to keep in mind in case of that we called as a result and that we called as a findings of the study. So this is the, if you go for, so you, this is very, very important. Most of the result that from your field study, or you have written on different themes, or if it is on the review article, so you needs to take an account of the result that you are doing. Okay, and it should be very clear, very concise, and different subheading that you need to write. And all the table and figure, that should be the table number 1, table number 2, table number 3, table number 4. One important point I will tell here. Most of the time, please read what is written there. Most of the time, if you go for, so you find that many times, many researchers write the table And also same data make the figure, graph. Please don't do that. And you have to keep in mind, always if you are writing journals, so you need to write cream of the table. Don't repeat it. In the table, same thing. In the graph, in the figure. No, don't do it. Either do it in this figure or in the table only once. And no need, if you go for, always keep in mind, you need to write the cream of the table. Don't write the descriptive narrative of whole the table, the male, female, all the, no. So you as a researcher, you need to write what is the table and what is the data out of the main cream of the table that you want to write on this contest. That is the important point you need to keep in mind. And so if you go for this point that we called as a, if you go for just look at it, this is the discussion. Please, so on this point, on this aspect, so if you go for you findings, you find different major findings. And if you go for discussion is very, very essential for a journal article. Most of the, if you go for this research paper, so if you have not written your discussion part in one paragraph or two paragraphs, your paper will be immediately rejected. So your duty is that maybe in one paragraph, two paragraph, so you need to write this discussion part of your research paper. So basically, if you go for, so what is the meaning of the discussion? Basically, interpretations of the result is there in your discussion part. Okay, so what you have to do? So you have to, you as a researcher, you need to connect the principle, the relationship, the generalizations, so shown from the result. And you need to compare. So what particularly, so if you go for what is the similarity, what is the difference, so from your particularly the findings that you find or the existing literature, so how your result, so how your result is different or why this result is different on this contest, you need to write on this. And also you show your how your result and interpretations agree or disagree with this previous literature what is there. Okay, so all the point that particularly if you go for on this aspect that we are talking about, on this discussion theoretical implication, all the point that what is the new, the findings of the relationship, the generalizations, what you find, maybe you need to write in 1 and 2 pages. This is, remember one thing, I always say, this is very, very essential. If you go for most of the paper, discussion should be must, at least 1 paragraph. You need to write 1 paragraph on discussions or taking all the point that is written in this PPT. You just look at it, yeah? So you need to be very, very careful that whatever you find from the result that you need to discuss, needs to interpret. So no, nothing new that is not, you are not finding from this field or result, you should not interpret in these discussions. So this is something is very, very essential. You as a researcher, you need to keep whenever you are writing this discussion chapter. And then, so all the points, so I am not discussing detail, you will read this, I have many times I have shared, I will share. So always you as a researcher, so you need to explain and summarize what is the implications of these findings, or sometimes many discussions, maybe some people say the policy implications. Many people say that you need to write some limitations. So that is of your choice how you are writing on this case. Then the last part, if you go for particularly on the contest that we are talking about, the conclusions. The conclusions is very, very essential. Most of the journals, we write conclusion and way forward, or we write way forward, okay, or policy implication. So you as a researcher, so you on this, particularly on this contest, so in a logical way and meaningful way, so you need to write these broad findings with respective to your objective or your hypothesis that you have taken into account. Okay, so broadly key findings. So, and that findings, if you are maybe this theoretical, the empirical, the practical implications of that findings. And then the last part is particularly, this particularly that what is the implications of your study? What is particularly on the contest that if you go for, because this is important, what you want, your suggestions, your how this study, so you as a researcher, you are providing recommendations, suggestions, implications. That is very, very essential. And the last is the, if you go for the further studies. So taking all this background, so you need to write a research paper. So this is broadly, so remember one thing that I want to share here on this. This is the structure of the any manuscript that you are writing. So that means if you go for your title, your abstract, your keyword, your background or your introduction, your review of literature, your data sources, your findings, your discussions, and your conclusions. Most of the journals, if you go for, this is the structure that you need to follow. So my humble request, I will share this, the video link in my channel. So you just combine the Professor Sadiq lecture and you try to read, and many times if you go for Professor Sadiq lecture, so many things are there. So many, all the AI technology on this concept. I'm not talking about that. So I am, because last part, he was not discussed on the structure that we are talking about. Okay, so this is the things that we are, this is the first part, that the structure of the article that you as a researcher, you need to know. Okay, so and then last is reference. I always say you need to always, if you are writing articles, remember one thing. So always cited contemporary articles, maybe 10 years, within 10 years, all the articles that you have cited and all the peer-reviewed journals. So that may be Scopus, not whatever, you need to follow on that. And also the important point you need to keep in mind, always most of the researcher, if you go for many references are there, but in the test, their citation is not there. So, but in the test, the citation is there, but reference, their name is not there. So you, my humble request to all of you, that you need to keep whatever you have cited, that should be exactly in the reference. And whatever exactly in the reference, that should be cited. That is the third point that you need to keep. And always I say, all the established author in this area, you need to take into account whenever write. And this is important, always, you don't give your own citations, own reference, always own article in the citations, and this style. Always go to the journal guidelines, and whether it is, most of the, we follow the AP style, but the journal instructions are there, journal guidelines are there. So this is the structure from the starting to ending of a manuscript that you need to write. Okay, so now if you go for now if you have any questions, please let me ask. So I will try to discuss, then we'll go for the other points. That what you as a reader or reviewer or the editor, and what point, common sense point I will share, then I will stop. Any questions? Any questions so far?
Yes,
And
Prof.
those who are, please.
Sir, can we ask?
Mine is not a request. I just want to please a request for your YouTube channels. If you can drop it for us.
Yeah, I will
your
say
WhatsApp group channel.
yes.
So that we can join. I'll
All
be following you.
yeah. So you just my humble request to all the
What I
researchers
need-
who
what
are
I
here.
need-
So I will
What I
share
need
this
is that
WhatsApp.
we need the link. If you can drop the link,
I will share. I will
if you
share in
can
the
get the link
WhatsApp.
to join.
Yes, I will share the link. I will share the link. I will share the link in this your WhatsApp group. So All India Research Scholar group, please join the All India Research Scholar group. So I will share this All India Research Scholar group. I will share the YouTube channel link. Okay. So any questions so far?
Sir,
Yeah.
if you have some time, please give some more time for discussion point.
Discussion point. Yes.
Sir, can I
So,
ask question
give some
related
more.
to publication?
हाँ पूछो अभी yes you can ask. Yes.
Sir, like I am doing my PhD and I have not published.
Aditi, just 1 minute.
Aarti, sir.
Aarti,
Yes,
हाँ.
sir. Haan ji.
Aarti, you just talk 1 minute. So, Sir is asking the questions regarding discussions. So, I will say one thing to all the researchers, those who are present here. Discussion is very, very essential part of the particularly any manuscript that you are writing. First point, the discussion may be written in 1 paragraph or 2 paragraph of your as a subheading in the discussions. And your duty is that you discuss this result, the broad important result and results interpretations or in the discussions, and link these interpretations to the existing literature. That means how or why your study is different, if particularly on the context, the findings that you get. So how may be different from the existing literature, or same with the existing literature, or if it is a difference, why that is, that explanations you needs to provide on this. And what is unexpected result that you find from your study, and that explanation, that interpretation, that needs to be discussed in the case of discussions. So linking the literature, so your particularly the interpretations, so you needs to write 1 paragraph, 2 paragraph must in the discussion paper. Otherwise it will be, most of the cases I realize this young researcher, they miss on this aspect. Okay, so you needs to be on this aspect, you need to think of.
In this part, can we go through with our observation and our comments? Sometimes
Yes,
results
yes,
say something,
yes.
and my observation.
Yes,
Yeah.
everything. If suppose you are differ from existing, why? Why? What is the narrative of that? What is the explanation of that? So you needs to write every dimension on this aspect that you have to keep in mind.
Can
Okay,
we discuss
so
our limitations also in there?
yes,
in
some
primary
journals.
studies,
Yes,
lots
some
of
journals. Yes, some journals. It suggests many people written. I always say you can write the limitation in. If you write limitation, you just write in 1-2 line. Please, don't write in 3 sentence or 4 sentence. Just 1-2 line. If you are writing the limitation, that you can write. It is not essential that you need to write detailed limitations of your study in this case.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Sir,
Huh.
excuse me, sir.
Huh.
Sir, I am an aspiring PhD student, so I actually had a doubt regarding the PhD thesis. So, is PhD thesis the better version of a research paper? And I also know that in PhD thesis, we do it or divide it according to chapters. So, how do we actually do it? How do we divide the entire thing into chapters?
Oh, PhD thesis, if you go for different, if you go for real sense, like most of the foreign university, so different chapters, suppose 4-5 chapters becomes your PhD thesis. So if you combine 5 chapter, 5 paper, so that becomes your PhD thesis. So many stories are there in the foreign university. 3 essays is becomes your PhD thesis. So maybe, so particularly if you go for your PhD work, you will learn a lot. So basically combinations of different papers, so that give you your PhD thesis. So for the timing, you try to understand on this platform, we are doing it for you people. So we'll discuss detail whenever time permit.
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you, sir.
So all those who have, please join this All India Research Scholar Group. If those who have not joined, so the All India Research Scholar Group 6, those who are there, they can share the link here. And we are sharing all the informations there. So to all the students, so you take benefit of that. Yes, other question, please.
Sir, if the study is qualitative and primary baseline or the then what we can add in methodology?
So you write everything, same thing, that the study, everything, it is qualitative, whatever. I just tell the same story, all the methodology of the, you needs to write all the point in the primary survey that I have written. You need to write all the points, the study area, the sampling size, the data sources, how you collect the data, the ethical concern, the data analysis, because there is a content analysis, thematic analysis, narrative analysis. So, so that different analysis are there for qualitative data analysis. So we'll do it very soon. We have done it. We will do it for you people also. WhatsApp group, if anyone is there in the All India Research Scholar group in this, please share in the chat box. So All India Research Scholar group 6, those who have not joined. Please, anyone in the All India Research Scholar group 6, so please share in this chat box the links of All India Research Scholar group so that other people can join in this platform. Okay, so can I proceed another 5-10 minutes? Then you will ask me questions or any other questions.
Good evening, sir.
Yes.
Thank you for this time. Actually, I mean, my question is maybe out of the context, but I want to ask this question. Last time I had an interview with a ICSSR for an internship. So during the time I mentioned regarding this WhatsApp group, and then I had a wrong knowledge about this, and I said that this group was actually funded by ICSSR. That I said, but he said the interviewee said that the interviewer said that the ICSSR doesn't fund any form of this how do I say any like what any how, oh my god, I'm sorry, any group that they for scholars. So for that reason, like I want to really know if this the knowledge.
I understand. I understand your question. Yes.
The knowledge
yes.
that you're sharing to us, is it like funded by ICSR? That's what I want to know.
No, nothing. This is only for the benefit of the students. We are doing it since last continuously 3 years, but we are doing since 5 years for the benefit of the students. We are not funded by anyone. We are not paying anyone any honorarium. all the research person, those who are coming with their interest for the benefit of the students. And we are doing on the same link with the same, if you go for, we have 6,000 students, now India and outside India also. Okay, so we are not funded by anyone. So we are not getting fund single, we are doing only for the benefit of the students. That's the only intention. We learn from each other, we'll help each other. That is the motto that we are doing. We are not doing anything on this particularly funded by the ICCR or any funding agency. We are not taking any single amount from anyone.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, so you just, I have shared the all, some students have just shared the All India Research Scholar group. So please join in this, those who have not joined in the chat box. So join there. So any please, you take this benefit of that we are doing. Okay, so now you just look at it. Give me 5-10 minutes. So you just all this, if you now you have written your paper. So if you go for, so always if you as whenever you are submitting a paper, you need to keep in mind what a editor want, what a reviewer want. Okay, all the point that is written, always whenever you are submitting a manuscript to a journal, the first important point you need to keep in mind that always the journal's aim and scope. Always, if suppose it is beyond the aims and scope of the journals, the editor immediately it will reject the articles immediately within 4 or 5 days. So you need to keep in mind that always you need to keep that you first you go to the journal, select the journal, go to the journal guidelines first. Minimum read 2 times regarding the journal guidelines. All the instruction to the editors, authors. Every journal is there. Please mute, someone's sound is coming, please mute. So if you go for, this is the first point. And the second point that you need to keep in mind, so you need to all the guidelines. And what is new in your, always the editor, if you go for the rejection is there, is because of this particularly, what is your contribution? What is new in your research work? Or why I will publish your research paper in this journal? Okay, what is the originality? What is the new? What is the novelty of this particularly this contest that you want to publish? Okay, so all this, if you go for, this is the, and also you as a researcher, you need to very clear all this logical, the ethical, I have already explained the ethical clearance certificate. Okay, so you as a researcher, so whenever you are submitting a journals, you know the first step, I have already written, you just look at it. If you go for all these rejections, the desk rejections, if you go for, is basically, you just look at it. Always when you say, what do you mean by desk rejection? Desk rejection means whatever journals that you submit to the journal website, so without review, the editor himself or herself so reject the paper with the clarity that it is beyond the scope of the journal, or this is nothing new in the journal. So on this methodological point, or the poor language and the structure of the problem, or the ethical clearance disclosed, or the plagiarism and the AI report that we are talking about. Okay, most of you as a researcher, so humble request to all of you that this is the most, the slide is visible or not? Slide is visible or not?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
It
so
is
just
visible.
give me,
No
yes,
slides.
maybe,
No
so,
slides.
yeah, all the, I will share, I will not, maybe it is not possible that I will tell everything I have written because time is, I understand you have time constraint. So you as a researcher, so all the point, wrong journal scope, insufficient novelty, methodological flaw, poor language structure, missing it, all the point. So I have all the explanations is there in this case. Okay, if you go for, so how you will avoid this best rejections. So always, so this is the last point. Many other points are there. So the first important you need to please go to the journal website and read 2 times, 3 times the guideline. Okay, so look at it, whether this journal published in the same area or not. If suppose the journal is not publishing in that same area, because every journal's previous 5-6 year articles are there. So just look at it, go to the guidelines. Okay, so that you have to take into account. And this is the important point. And the same important point you need to keep in mind, that what is the new in these articles? What is my contribution in the article? What is the significance of the study? That already this particularly on the context that you are making in this paper, that a reader or the editor will be interested to read your paper. So that is the second point you as a researcher, you need to keep in mind. And the third point you need to keep in mind, that the methodology should be clearly written. All the points that I have written in 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs, you need to write each point clearly, the methodology. And then the fourth point, that as per the journal guideline, the formatting, the reference required, the table, the figure, every instructions that needs to be clearly followed as per the journal guidelines. And you as a researcher, you need to write a clear, concise, and compelling abstract. Because if your abstract is not very interesting, it is not written properly. Many times I've seen as a reviewer. So you find the abstract is not written in the proper format. I have explained these things. Okay, so that you need to retain in the proper order. And also the language, the proofread. Always I say that you as a researcher, always so read once, read second times, read third times, discuss with your friends, take comments from your friends, take comments from a supervisor, whoever in the academic. So you try to take the suggestions and try to improve it. And the last part is that, so always you need to keep in mind that in the contemporary times, that we called as your plagiarism and your AI. You know that in the contemporary times, so important dimension is the plagiarism issue or the AI issue. Yes, most of the journals, if you go for, so you as a researcher, you need to keep in mind most of the journals is, if you go for, you are not following the AI, if you are not checking AI or not checking the plagiarism, so you know that your article is not going to be considered. So this is many other points are there. So I will share this PPT. So if you have any questions, please let me ask. I will stop now.